Good morning, everybody, and lovely to be here with you today. I'm Vicky Amlot. I'm the fund manager at Henley Investment Management. I'm here with my colleague Aubrey, who's going to be doing part of the presentation as well. I'm here to really give you an overview of the supported housing sector from an investment perspective. So Henley as a business is a wide real estate business, but the main focus areas are really around residential development, deal by deal kind of opportunity led, and fund management, and randomly a US car wash business called Aquasonic. So Henley has the fund management business has been investing in the supported housing sector since 2017, when we launched SIPUT One. That fund is now closed to new investment, and we launched a second fund in May 2022. We work with 26 housing providers across the UK, Chrysalis being one of those on both of the funds. And we have a team that is 100% focused on managing the supported housing assets under management and delivering housing solutions for vulnerable people. We try to take a really collaborative approach, working with key stakeholders, whether that's our housing providers, care providers or commissioners, and I'll give you a bit more insight into our approach to the sector. But we try to be, rather than just the head landlord, we try to be a kind of approachable landlord where we can work with partners to really get the best outcomes for occupational tenants. So there's 6 of us in the Henley FM team. Stuart Savage started the business in 2017 with the launch of the first fund. Myself, Stuart and Jenny are more on the investment side. I'm a surveyor by training. I worked for 20 years at Schroders and Aviva Investors on real estate, alternative real estate asset classes. So they were classed as alternative, kind of student accommodation, residential care, but now they're very much mainstream for a lot of investors. Jenny is on the investor relations side, and she's really responsible for bringing in new equity to the sector and being able to give us funding to develop new schemes. It's not an easy equity raise market at the moment. The consultations that are going ahead at the moment with pension funds has made things particularly tricky, but we are trying, and as we keep telling Colin, there will be good news at some point. On the more operational side, we have 3 team members. So Charlotte Nunn is on the business development side and has managed quite a few of the acquisitions that we've recently done. Aubrey will give a bit more background on his role a bit later. And then we have Hans on the property management side, who deals with a lot of the kind of repairs and maintenance and CapEx spend, working with our RP tenants. So what is the supported housing sector? I guess most of you in this room will know, given where you work, but really it's providing accommodation alongside support, supervisional care to help vulnerable people live as independently as they can. So that covers a whole range of accommodation, from people that will need or have long-term conditions and will need lifelong support, to those that just need short-term help while they transition to more mainstream housing. And government policy over recent years has led to the closure of a lot of long-stay hospitals and a policy to deliver more care in the community in supported living settings. And one of the main reasons for delayed discharge from hospital is that there is a lack of social care and supported housing in the community. In terms of the 3 broad types, just at a very kind of simplistic level, there's sheltered extra care provision for the elderly, there's short-term transitional accommodation, and there's the longer-term accommodation for people with long-term physical conditions, learning disabilities, autism, or long-term mental health conditions. And that last one is really the main focus for us as a fund. So the majority of the homes that we own provide accommodation for working age adults with long-term conditions that will require care and support for the remainder of their lives. I think as Anne said, the research in terms of the sector is quite patchy, and getting a kind of definitive number of units that provide supported housing or the need for it is quite variable. But as you can see there, that the latest government statistics are suggesting that we currently have around 84,000 supported living units for individuals with long-term disabilities. But if you take into account the shortfall in supply at the moment and projections for increased demand, the government are suggesting that there will need to be over 300,000 extra units provided by 2040 to meet that demand. It's not just improved outcomes for occupational tenants, there's also a strong economic incentive for government support for the sector. If you compare the cost of someone being looked after in a hospital setting or a registered care setting, it's a lot more expensive than in the supported housing sector, and particularly when you take into account the fact that local authorities can recharge or claim a subsidy on housing benefit payments from the DWP. So in terms of how we have invested in the supported housing sector, this is basically the model. So the fund would sit in the middle. We have a number of long-term leases with housing providers on the left-hand side there. And those housing providers then grant the tenancies to the occupational tenants who have care and support needs. And then the housing providers will submit housing benefit claims to the local authority funded by DWP, which will allow them to pay their rent and meet the liabilities in terms of repair and maintenance under their lease. The housing provider then has a service level agreement with the care provider who provides the care and support on site. So ultimately, the rent that we receive and pay out to investors as distributions is funded via leases to housing providers and via housing benefit claims. Back in kind of 2017, 18, 19, when a lot of money was coming into the supported housing sector, all the leases that were granted to housing providers were 25 years plus. There has been quite a move away from that, driven a lot by feedback from the regulator around the risks of the long lease model for housing providers. So now we see much more of a range, kind of 10 to 25 years in terms of the leases that we sign up to. Obviously there's pros and cons for both, and quite often we do offer options to extend leases, because at the end of the day we're trying to provide accommodation for life to the tenants that are for life for the tenants that are in occupation. Rent reviews are on an annual basis linked to CPI. We've tied in our rent review pattern with the general housing benefit uplift pattern. So they increase in April based on September CPI, which for last year was 1.7%. The leases are on a full repairing basis, so the housing providers that we work with are responsible for maintaining those properties, although we insure the properties, that is recharged to the housing providers, who then claim that through their gross housing benefit claims. And in terms of initial rent level, what we have done based on the learnings from the past is develop a model where rents are very much set based on the costs of delivery of the accommodation. So the rent levels can really be justified from a housing benefit perspective. So we apply a yield to our total costs of delivery of a scheme, and then that generates the rent that is charged to tenants and housing benefit. Just to give a bit more flavour of the funds that we manage, the first fund that I mentioned that was launched in 2017 was a 25-year life fund. It's closed to new investment, but we have raised for that fund 435 million that has been deployed into the supported housing sector. That fund raised equity from defined benefit pension funds, so effectively final salary pension funds, and one LGPS, so local government pension scheme investor. We have seen a real switch in terms of investor appetite, with the final salary pension market really closing down. So when we launched Fund 2 in 2022, we've really targeted local government pension schemes that are filling the gap that has been left by a lot of the defined benefit schemes in the private sector. So we've raised 85 million on Fund 2, and that is all pretty much committed to new schemes now. And we're targeting 60 to 70% of the fund being delivered in the supported housing space. and then 30 to 40% has a broader social remit. So whether that is care leavers, elderly care, children's care services, although everything that we've invested in to date has been specialist supported housing. So the investment objective is really to deliver a kind of gilt plus income stream to investors that they can use to match their pension liabilities. So we work on a 5 to 6% income distribution, and then a 6 to 7% annualised return over a 20-year investment period. The social objective of the fund is to deliver high quality, energy efficient social housing across the UK, and this is a real plus for our investors. They're very much seeing this as a social impact investment rather than a real estate investment, and getting kind of feedback from housing providers and care providers of the benefits that the accommodation has provided to occupational service users is a real benefit for us. The fund's open-ended, so we can raise equity for this fund forever, effectively, although I won't be around for that long. And the minimum investment is £10 million. So we've got investments in the fund ranging up to 50 million, but the smallest investment is 10 million. Both portfolios are very diversified, so this is Fund 1. We own 334 assets in Fund 1, which provide 2,000 lettable units across the UK. You can see the black dots there on where our schemes are located, and the shading on there shows areas of deprivation. And you can see that there is a real focus on areas where, or the most deprived areas where there's also corresponding most need. So Chrysalis is, I think they're the eighth largest tenant in that portfolio with 6% of the assets, and we've got properties in North London and Peterborough within this portfolio with Chrysalis. Fund 2 is a lot smaller at the moment, but there are aspirations to grow it to the size of Fund 1. We own 48 assets within that portfolio, 45 of which are already operational, and the remainder we're still completing the build. So they will deliver 320 lettable units when the schemes are complete. 6 of those properties are leased to Chrysalis, so 26 lettable units, and they're all underwritten by housing management agreements or local authority nominations. So Chrysalis is actually the third largest tenant for us in this portfolio, and we've got a clustered holding around Oxfordshire and Croydon, and one in Peterborough, I think. So this is just a summary table of what we've invested in, and I mentioned that investors are really looking for social impact from their investment in this fund. So we've really tried to deliver additional stock to the sector rather than just recycling supported housing that is already in the market. So 45 of the 48 schemes that we've acquired are new to sector, so they provide additionality in terms of homes for vulnerable people. We've got 22 of the 48 schemes are underwritten by noms and voids agreements, and we've tried to get a balance between purpose-built schemes and refurbishments. Where we have done refurbishments, they have been back to brick, total strip out of properties. They obviously can be delivered a lot more quickly than new build schemes that typically have a kind of 2-year lead in. So we've really tried to get that balance between meeting current demand and also delivering new build stock. And now I'll hand over to Aubrey to just give a bit more background on how we work in practice with our housing partners.
Thank you, Vicky. So my name is Aubrey St Louis. Aubrey St Louis, so some of you know me, just introducing myself. So my background, before coming to Henley, I worked for over 25 years in the public sector for my sins, mainly around housing benefit. Following that, I've moved on to Henley. In my time at my more recent placement, or my most recent job at the Borough of Ealing, I retrained as a therapist. So a lot of the work that's done within the Chrysalis group has, really resonates with me in terms of that. It's not my day-to-day kind of work, but that, you know, part of who I am and how I operate in my role. After my qualification, I was able to work 4 years in the NHS, delivering sort of one-to-one psychotherapy in that sort of setting. So that's a little bit about me. I'm happy to sort of answer any questions over lunch or coffee. Okay, so getting on to the slide. So Henley team currently works with 26 different housing providers, together maintaining over 80 active service level agreements, or SLAs, with care providers. So we have regular engagement with housing providers, tenants, who I hope it reflects our commitment that we have to delivering high quality supported housing through those strong sort of partnerships. And I think that's one of our strengths in Henley, that we really do work on those partnerships. Part of my role within Henley is, on one hand, it is around housing benefit, but the other part of it, my main day-to-day, is around partnerships with our counterparties. So our housing provider tenants, the role that I have within that, we're generally speaking to people about things like CapEx, or capital expenditure, which is like the improvement to a property, housing benefit challenges, which are many and complex, and also, I don't know if Vicky spoke about it, but in terms of the long lease model, about lease restructuring. So what we've done in partnership with a lot of our tenants is to look at that lease position and come to a situation, or come to a position where we're more sharing the risk. So it's not all held with the housing association, it's not all held with a care provider, but it's shared within that partnership. So our strategy overall is rooted in having that sort of transparent dialogue, to ensure that we're aligned and we've got that mutual understanding between all of us. Okay, so as I said, I spent over 25 years in housing benefit, temporary accommodation and management assurance. So throughout that time and that experience, I feel I've got a strong understanding of some of the operational challenges and the financial pressures that our housing association partners have, and also some of our counterparties within the local authority. I know at my last place, which was the London Borough of Ealing, every year we're looking at budgets. Adult social care are looking at their budgets, the impact that has to the rest of the local authority. So year to year is a challenge that's ongoing. So as a fund, I think we have that kind of understanding of the challenges that our counterparties have year to year. So across the portfolio, I've worked with various housing associations, Chrysalis included. Maxine's smiling. We've had some challenges along the way, and Colin as well. I think remember those meetings. So yeah, we're not an arm's length funder. We do get involved. We do like to know what's going on, and I think we've got quite a good understanding of the sector. So in terms of that assistance that we give, we might look at things like helping with processes and policies, in support of housing benefit, advising on areas, particularly around those challenges with housing benefit, joint strategy, things like that. And where necessary, advising if unfortunately it goes to like a first tier tribunal, which is like where they appeal the housing benefit claim. It goes to the first tier of court. So at Henley, I think we take pride in the quality of the relationships that we've built, spanning from commissioning bodies to housing providers, contractors, developers and care providers. We recognise that in delivering delivering effective supported housing, it requires a diverse skill and collaborative team, and it's something you always hear me talk about, collaboration and working together and partnership, and it can be a bit cliche, but I really do believe that the way that we work together, that's one of our strengths at Henley, and I think if you speak to any of our counterparties, they'll echo the same, hopefully. But our shared goal is to really provide a best-in-class, person-centred service that not only supports our partners, but ultimately enhances the lives of tenants and service users. Okay, so now we've just got a couple of case studies of schemes that we've delivered with Chrysalis. So the first one is in Dickock, Oxfordshire. This was the local authority, Oxfordshire County Council, with their noms and voids for 12 service users, a new build development of 12 lettable units plus on-site carer accommodation. The property was commissioned for young people moving from residential colleges or a home setting and provides a mix of shared and self-contained accommodation. The next one is in South Croydon. So this was Croydon Council, again with the noms and voids, provided for 5 service users. This was a total refurbishment of an existing residential property for 5 identified users, nominations and voids agreements with the local authority, underwriting rental income in the case of voids, and any housing benefit shortfall for the duration of the lease.
Just to add, this is a touchstone. Sorry, this is a touchstone scheme, so we did fund a few schemes with Chrysalis, and this is one of them.
Okay, the next one we're looking at is Abingdon in Oxfordshire. Again, Oxfordshire County Council for 2 service users. So this was a reconfiguration of an existing 3-bedroom detached bungalow, and the reconfiguration was into 2 self-contained 1-bedroom flats for already identified service user tenants. There's separate carer accommodation on site. Both properties have their own entrances and gardens to allow for privacy. The property has been brought up to an EPC B rating during works. And another touchstone production. And then finally, the last one in Oxfordshire, this was Oxfordshire County Council for 1 service user. So this was a reconfiguration of an existing 3/4 bedroom detached bungalow into a single occupancy bungalow with staff accommodation. The property was chosen and specified with a particular tenant in mind. So the sort of things that's involved in such a high spec project, sensor operated taps, integrated blinds. It has a rural location given the needs of this particular individual and their own privacy. I visited this scheme and it was, I was blown away by just, we see a lot of properties and the standard, the level of the spec was fantastic, and I'm sure the service user is enjoying something there. That's it. Thank you.
Take any questions if anyone's got any. I presume that's rhetorical, Colin.